Hey everybody, thanks so much for being part of our community and for gathering together in your groups. I know you've already read the scriptures for this morning. What I'm going to do is offer you a few things to consider during your group discussions. And I encourage you to think about what's grabbing your attention most and how God might be inviting you to respond to him in faith this week. If I ask you the question, who are you? How would you respond? I imagine pretty much all of us would start with our names. And then maybe some of you would start to talk about how you're related to other people, like I'm Ashlyn's brother, or I'm a mom, and I've got 2 boys. Some of you might give me your age or talk about what grade in school you are. I imagine, though, that all of us would eventually talk about what we do. You know, some of you would tell me what sports you enjoy or what activities you're involved with or what your job title and description is. Maybe a few of you would even share with me what you're the most passionate about in life. I seriously doubt, though, that any of you would respond, I'm a child of God. I'm a citizen of heaven. I'm a sinner saved by grace. Yet if the Bible is true and Jesus is real, those words are the truest things about you. Those things go much deeper than relationships or how you spend your time. Those words are words of identity that can never change. We've talked before about one way to understand ourselves is with the words identity and activity. Identity is all about who we are, and activity is all about what we do. Both of those things are incredibly important and necessary in the Christian life. But God says that one always precedes the other. Identity always comes before activity. Why is it then that when we're asked to describe who we are, we talk about what we do? I think one of the main reasons is that in our modern Western culture, we're told over and over that it's the way that we should see ourselves and see others. You don't just get to enjoy soccer, but you're a soccer player. Now go and be a soccer star. You're a mom, sure, but you need to be a perfect balance of accommodating, accepting, affirming so that your kids can explore themselves and become who they are, but provide enough discipline and structure so that they're well-mannered and behaved. Oh, and go ahead and give them a lot of varied experiences too, so that they can become well-rounded people. You're a business owner? Fantastic. Well, how big's your company? Did you grow last year? Are you increasing sales year over year? How do you relate? How do you perform when compared to other businesses in town? We talked about this last week, but our world is wired for performance. Sadly, what this often means is that we get our identity, that is who we are on the inside, too closely tied to performance. We feel good or bad based on how well or how poorly we've done in any particular area of life, based either on the expectations and standards that other people put on us, or the standards that we put on ourselves. As we get into Paul's words this morning, I'd like to talk to you on 3 points. The first is why we can miss the gospel. The second is how we can be sure of the gospel. And the third is how we can know if we believe the gospel. Last week, we began our study of this letter that Paul wrote to the churches in Galatia. It's a region that's part of Western Turkey today. And as he wrote about it, he talked so much about the gospel, and we came to understand that the gospel is the central message of the Christian faith. Gospel is this word that means good news, specifically the good news of God's grace that's given freely to us in Jesus. It's the offer of the fullest and most secure life imaginable that comes through a relationship with him. And what's especially good news is that this offer of this relationship comes completely independent of our performance. Jesus already came to earth. Jesus already went to the cross. Jesus already rose again. All those acts have already happened and can't be undone. The problem for the Galatian churches was that they were starting to leave behind this message of grace and revert back to this life based on performance. The church in Galatia was made up of both Christians that had a Jewish background and Christians that didn't have a Jewish background. And some of the Jewish Christians were saying, yeah, it's true that Jesus died and completely paid the penalty for your sin. Yes, it's true that he rose from the grave and now you have the hope of heaven. Yes, it's true that you've been given the Holy Spirit, who's this deposit guaranteeing all the things that are coming your way. But to really inherit all that God has for you, you have to believe in all that stuff, plus practice some religious customs. In essence, they were saying that they believed in grace plus a few other things. They were saying that their relationship with God depended on both what Jesus had done and what they were doing. When we think about it, it's funny how little has changed in almost 2,000 years, isn't it? We get the same kind of things mixed up, don't we? We think that to be right with God, we have to be good. So we're fearful and anxious about being found out for the things that we've done in the past or the things that we're going to mess up on today. Or even worse, we too often believe that we can actually attain goodness on our own, right? We try to earn our righteousness for ourselves, and so then we self-justify whenever we mess up, or we push the focus away from our mistakes towards the mistakes and shortcomings of others, and become judgmental of them. This is why, to me, verse 11 makes so much sense. The gospel I preached is not of human origin. Yes, that's right, isn't it? When we think about that, because we humans are so wired for performance. And so everything we do is based on striving to achieve. Do this, and then you'll be accepted. Do this, and then you'll be validated. Do this, and then you'll be loved. It's no different with religion, right? I'm not just talking about kind of the world out there. I'm talking about us. Every one of the world's major religions says, do this, and then God will accept you. Do this, and then you'll escape suffering. Do this, and then you'll live. Every religion except Christianity, that is. Because at the heart of Christianity is the gospel. And the gospel says, you are accepted, now live. Do you understand how radical this is when you stop to think about it? I'm sure inside of you there's something where this is just completely rubbing you the wrong way. And yet there's another side of you that when you stop to think about it, it's the only thing that makes sense. I mean, I've heard somebody say before, just throw out God's law and just take your own law, whatever your own definition of right and wrong is. You know, a silly example is, I don't personally believe that it's right to walk down the street and just punch people in the face for no reason. I imagine many of you are like me. And so I don't walk down the street and punch people in the face. But there's other things like lying, like thinking really angry, mean thoughts about people. That personally, I wouldn't like it if people did that to me. I don't actually think that those things are right, but I've done those things. So even if you take God's law out of my life, my own law, my own definition of right and wrong, I can't uphold. This brings us to our next point. Maybe you're kind of tracking with me, but the question still remains, okay, I'm kind of getting this about grace and the gospel, but how can I be sure that it's the truth? What is it going to take for me to really believe in it? Paul told his audience in verse 12 that he received the gospel by revelation from Jesus Christ. I think that this isn't just Paul's story, but it's the story of everyone who would believe in the New Testament. And it's the story that we share in, any one of us share, if we want to believe today. Here's what I mean. It's one thing to know about Abraham Lincoln, to know where he grew up and what some of his childhood experiences might have been, to see love letters that he wrote his wife, maybe even to understand some of his leadership principles or how his faith impacted his view on slavery and fueled his conviction to abolish it. It would be a completely different thing, though, to actually have lived with Abraham Lincoln, to know him, right? To be one of his siblings who played with him or had dinner with him every night or experienced Christmas morning with him, to have been a friend who would share a pipe on the back porch with him during long summer evenings, to be in military debriefings during the Civil War, or maybe to be a trusted advisor that had to comfort him or put an arm on his shoulder during some of his most intense moments of difficulty and grief. I wonder if some of us only know Jesus in the way that we know Abraham Lincoln. We know about him, but we don't really know him. It's no wonder then that even though we might believe in the gospel, we don't really believe it. Just as we see Jesus as an interesting historical figure, we see grace as some sort of far-off theory or concept. I think that we need to have an encounter with Jesus to really be sure of grace. He has to be more than just words on a page to us. He has to be real to us. The good news for us is that he makes himself real to everyone, and he does it in a unique and personal way. Think of the leper in Mark 1, who no one else would touch, called out to Jesus, "If you're willing, make me clean." And Jesus touched the man, identified with his sickness, with his depravity, with his loneliness, and said to him, "I am willing, be clean." And he healed him. Then there was the woman at the well in John 4, at the well in the middle of the day, at the hottest time of day, because if she went when the other women in town went, she'd be ignored and snubbed and judged for her lifestyle decisions. But Jesus, who didn't have any reason to talk to her because he was a man and she was a woman, because he was a Jew and she was a Samaritan, not only spent time with her, but asked her questions, heard her story, identified with her, didn't judge her, even though he knew everything about her. And it changed her entire life. Have you had a moment like that? Have you had a moment where your soul has come face to face with Jesus and experienced his grace? Has he become personal for you yet? Do you know how much he loves you? For me, it came in high school on a weekend getaway to a Young Life camp. I'd grown up in the church, and so it wasn't that I didn't believe in God. I just didn't really want much to do with God. I didn't want to follow him. I didn't want to submit to him. I was okay being in charge of my life, acting however I wanted to act. But I had this vision as the speaker talked about Jesus up on the cross, and this realization that I had put him there, that the suffering that I was watching, that the gasps for breath, that just the incredible loneliness that he was experiencing was due to me. My mistakes, my errors had put him up there. And getting hit with the weight of that made me feel so small. And as we were given time to think about that and what the implications of that were on our lives, I just felt weak. I felt lonely. I felt dark. And as my head hung, as I sat outside, I really did have this sense that there was like an arm put around me, like a big brother reaching over and hugging me and saying, "It's okay, I've taken care of it. You can come back." I want to encourage you that it's okay if you don't know. I get it, right? This is one of the mysteries of Christianity. We talk about this guy who came from heaven, yet he was fully human. He lived a perfect life. He died. He was risen from the grave. And he spent some time with his followers, and then he ascended back into heaven. And we're supposed to have a face-to-face encounter with that guy? How is that even possible? Paul expressed the change that Jesus brought to his life. Look at verses 23 and 24. He said that I was the man who formerly persecuted Christians and is now preaching the faith that he tried to destroy, and they praised God because of me. Paul did a 180. His life was headed in one direction. He was a zealous Jew who was persecuting Christians, and then his life completely flipped. He became a Christian who took the message of grace and the gospel to non-Jews in the first century. One of the most vivid 180 stories that I've ever heard was from a woman named Brenda. I was in Baltimore, and a group of us were starting a community-based HIV testing area, and we partnered with a church in Northwest Baltimore to set up this testing site at a breakfast that they ran for the community every Saturday morning. And we got to know the people that were part of the church, and these three ladies that started the breakfast. And Brenda was one of those ladies. And one of my friends and I made this video to capture our experience. And And as part of that, Brenda shared her story, and I want to share it with you.
Hi, I'm Jan, and I'm a member of James Tabernacle.
Hi, I'm Judith, and I'm a member of James Tabernacle.
And hello, I'm Brenda, and I'm a member of James Tabernacle.
One Sunday, Lady Burgess was teaching, and she said, "What are we doing? We're not doing anything. We're not reaching the neighborhood. We're not out witnessing. We're in these walls doing absolutely nothing." And when I turned around, Brenda was looking at me, and we said, "This Saturday."
Yeah, it was like
We couldn't wait any longer.
we had like 25.
Yeah, we served 25 people
25
that day.
people
We
that
thought
day.
we did
Something
something
good. We was,
all
and
excited.
it was like, yeah. And then we said, well, let's do it again.
Next week, because we were going to do it once a month.
But it go ahead, another plan.
Yes.
Delivered me from, I can identify with so many people. I can just look at them sometime and discern that they're hurting. They've been out all night long. They just tired. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to be up all night smoking crack. I know what it's like to make a choice between whether I'm going to feed my kids or I'm going to smoke the crack.
Glory to God.
I know what it's like
Yes, God.
when your stuff is getting ready to be put out on the streets.
Thank you, Jesus.
And you have the money, but you don't
you,
want to
God.
spend the money
Thank you, God. Thank you.
because you're still trying to go and get one more.
Thank you, God.
I know. But I also know about the love that God has for me
Yes.
when He heard
Thank
me.
you, God.
So
Thank
I want
you,
to
God.
tell others,
Thank
I
you,
want to
God.
stream it out sometime,
Thank you, God.
that you can do this.
If you know Jesus, where have you done a 180? Now, to be clear, some 180s are instantaneous, and some 180s take a lot of time to completely make the turn, right? For me, a silly example is language, right? Before I was a follower of Jesus, I had really awful language, and I was intentional with it, right? And that was one thing that for me, Jesus cleaned up right away. And all of a sudden, I just didn't say the stuff I used to, and I started to say more constructive, positive things that I didn't used to, right? There's so many other areas of my life, areas of pride and arrogance, or areas where, I'm not present with people, where I need to slow down and see them like Jesus did, areas of selflessness in our marriage or with my kids, but I'm still not all the way there yet. But no matter if our changes are instantaneous or if they take place over a long period of time, change that comes from Jesus, change that comes from the gospel, is always change that happens as a response to grace. Our behavior aligns with who we are. It doesn't determine